In other words, so you see, before we became majorities in the United States, it was the big cities and the big city mayors and so forth that determined the presidential candidates and determined who would be president. As soon as you got the vote, the strength of the vote now is in the suburbs. And presidents now can be elected on suburban white votes. And therefore, the presidential candidates need no longer pay much attention to urban black votes, which is one of the reasons why then both Democrats and Republicans run hard during their campaigns against black people and the interests of black people. The only way they can maintain office and gain office is by running against black images, against Willie Hortons, against so-called crime and the other things, because that's the way they're going to get white suburban votes, people who are not even really being threatened by black crime, because it is black people in black cities who are the major victims of black on black violence. However, that violence is used to frighten white folk in electing presidents and other national and state officers. 20 years after passing the fair housing legislation, blacks are hyper-segregated in urban ghettos and in suburban neighborhoods, where still many blacks are homeless, sleeping on the sidewalks, under bridges, and in abandoned buildings. If you would read this month's Emerge magazine, based on an article based on a very interesting book called Apartheid USA, you would read a startling statement that says a black family that earns $50,000 has less choices of where it will live and how it would live than a Hispanic who earns $2,500. So where's your fair housing? What has it gained you? Blacks are more segregated today than we were in 1920 and in 1940. The whole movement of the demographics of America is to isolate black people totally in the urban ghettos and in the suburbs as well. That's right. And yet you brag about your fair housing laws. Yes, look at the reality of the situation. Look at the organizations that led these kind of campaigns. Look at the leadership that told us that these kinds of legislation would rescue us and make us hold hands with little black boys and little black girls. Where are we today? And what are our circumstances? 20 years after passing this law, we are in more trouble than ever. After 25 years of affirmative action, blacks find themselves kicked out of corporate America, find themselves with the highest unemployment rates, drifting into poverty ever more rapidly, while other ethnic groups gain employment ever more swiftly. And we find ourselves begging for handouts on the streets of America. If you read a detailed analysis in the Wall Street Journal last week, 2 full pages and a full column saying what? Losing ground. Blacks, the only group that suffered a total loss of employment during the recession. This is your affirmative action for you. Blacks who were 10, 15% of the working staffs of many corporations suffered 20, 30, 40, almost 50% of the cuts in jobs. During 90 and 91, when 60,000 blacks lost their jobs in American corporations, 60,000 Asians moved into jobs in American corporations. 55,000 Hispanics moved into jobs in American corporations. Where is your people of color? Where are these people every time they stand up? They say black and Latino. And yet we don't hear a word coming the other way. Yes, the white man gives you what you want with a vengeance. He says, you want it, I'll give it to you. You want affirmative action, we'll make everybody a minority. We'll bring the white women in on it. We'll bring all the other ethnics in on it. We'll lay a game on you called diversity in the workplace, and you'll fall for it. And then they will say, well, since we've got to hire all these other groups, we have to cut back on the number of people that we hire from you. Now, you can't object to us hiring Hispanics and Asians, can you? The most interesting thing about this situation, ladies and gentlemen, is that while we are flowing out of American corporations and black blue-collar workers are suffering great losses, with other ethnic groups gaining, this is at the very point where some 60 black people, distinguished Negro leaders, sit on nearly 170 corporate boards. Yes. People such as Vernon Jordan sits on 10 and earns $500,000 a year from just having his name on the boards. Okay? Did you read the piece last week? He's Clinton's favorite guy. Yeah. When Clinton wants to have fun, he calls Vernon. They play golf and go on the yacht together, and and he runs interference for Clinton, and they're just good old buddies. Even his law firm says, we didn't hire Jordan for his legal talents. They just say it out front. His role is to play golf and play around. Yes. He wouldn't take an offer to be Attorney General because he could have more clout sitting in the position that he's in. And the other civil rights organizations are wondering, say, Vernon, when are you going to give us a break? When are you going to act in the interests of black folk? He said, but I'm out of the civil rights game now. So isn't it a paradox then, that at the very point where we are being kicked out of America's corporations, we have blacks sitting on America's corporate boards. Some sitting on 5 and 6 and as many as 10. Is that the reason perhaps we don't hear about the losses that we are suffering? Is the situation one that by appointing these token Negroes to these boards, we will no longer complain, or they have had their mouths shut so that they no longer complain about our not being there, ladies and gentlemen? This is the result of affirmative action, the result of assimilationist program. 25 years after the initiation of black capitalism, blacks find their communities' markets dominated by aliens. Black business persons find they can't do business in America nor with America. After 40 years of being America's moral conscience, as a lot of Negroes like to brag about, blacks find their communities being devastated by immorality. After preaching brotherly love and race-transcending love, they find themselves to be the most hated of races. For blacks in America, 30 years after having the ringing words, free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, America has become even more of a prison, sealing their bodies, hopes, and aspirations in the dungeons of despair. For African Americans all over, for African Americans, all the promises of the civil rights era have been betrayed. Everything has been reversed. The more black elected officials have been elected, the worse off the black electorate has become. Yes. Black homelessness became a national scandal when a black man was appointed Secretary of Housing. The black community was overrun with AIDS, drugs, addiction, TB, and all sorts of diseases and maladies when a black man was appointed Secretary of Health. Black nations were overrun by the imperial armies of the United States when a black man was head of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. The more black judges appointed to the bench, the more black men became police commissioners and police officers, the more black men filled America's prisons. And black-on-black violence ravaged America's black ghettos. Let's look at it. The Honorable Supreme Court Justice, late Justice Thurgood Marshall, achieved greater victories in the United States Supreme Court as a lawyer than he did as a judge sitting on his bench. In fact, he sat on the bench and sadly witnessed his life's work being ravaged and savaged by a mean-spirited bench. As a black man assumed to become Secretary of Commerce, blacks as an ethnic group are the least ones engaged in what? Commerce, at home and abroad. In 1993, at the appointment of a black woman as Surgeon General, an ardent advocate of sex education and the dispensing of condoms, black teenage pregnancy and female-headed families threatened the very foundations of the black family and culture and the viability of the black community. This is the legacy of the leadership that we have confronted, ladies and gentlemen. And we must look at this situation and under whose leadership and what leadership this occurred. It occurred under the leadership of what I call the assimilationist, moralist leadership establishment. Those people who told us that our salvation lay in assimilating with other folk. That's right. We look at this shame as we see more black mayors elected, the deterioration of the black community hastened. Let's look quickly at the federal contributions to certain large cities in America. In 1977, let's look at the amount that the federal government contributed to city budgets. And let's compare that with what they received from the federal government in 1985, periods during which black mayors who were presiding over some of America's cities. In 1977, New York City's budget, 19% of it was gotten from the federal government. By 85, it was only 9%. Los Angeles started with 18%. By 85, it was 2%. Chicago, 27% in 77, 15% in 85. Philadelphia, 20% in 77, 8% in 85. Detroit, 23%, now in 85, 12%. Baltimore, 20%, 85, 6%. Pittsburgh, 24%, 85, 13%. Boston, 13%, in 85, 7%. Cleveland, 33%, in 85, 19%. Minneapolis, 21%, in 85, 9%. So are the black mayors bringing in the money? Are the elected officials bringing in the money? As a matter of fact, what you have going on here, ladies and gentlemen, is a war against black cities. You have the federal government itself engaging